Part 2. The Ccru Club. Genesis of neolemurianism. Lemurian Time War. The account that follows charts William Burroughs' involvement in an occult time war, and considerably exceeds most accepted conceptions of social and historical probability. It is based on sensitive information passed to the crew by an intelligence source whom we have called William K. The narrative has been partially fictionalized in order to protect this individual's identity. K himself admitted that his experiences had made him prone to paranoid chronomaniac hallucination, and Crew continues to find much of his tale extremely implausible. Nevertheless, while suspecting that his message had been severely compromised by dubious inferences, noise, and disinformation, we have become increasingly convinced that he was indeed an insider of some kind, even if the organization he had penetrated was itself an elaborate hoax, or collective delusion. K referred to this organization as the Order, or, following Burroughs' the Board. When reduced to its basic provocation, K's claim was this: the ghost lemurs of Madagascar, which he also referred to as the Burroughs Necronomicon, a text dating from 1987, had been an exact and decisive influence on the magical and military career of one Captain Mission. 3 centuries previously, Mission appears in historical record as a notorious pirate, active in the period around 1700 AD. He was to become renowned as the founder of the anarchistic colony of Libertatia, established on the island of Madagascar. K asserted that he had personally encountered clear evidence of Burroughs' impact upon Mission at the private library of Peter Weisbarov, where K worked most of his life. The Weisbarov collection, he unswervingly maintained, held an ancient illustrated transcript of the ghost lemurs of Madagascar, inscribed meticulously in Mission's own hand. K assured us that the board considered the demonstrable time rift he was describing to be a matter of the gravest concern. He explained that the organization had been born in reaction to a nightmare of time coming apart and, to use his exact words, spiraling out of control. To the board, spirals are particularly repugnant symbols of imperfection and volatility. Unlike closed loops, spirals always have loose ends. This allows them to spread, making them contagious and unpredictable. The board was counting on K to contain the situation. He was assigned the task of terminating the spiral simplex. Hyperstition. Weisbarov had sought out Burroughs because of his evident interest in the convergence of sorcery, dreams and fiction. In the immediate post-war years, Weisbarov had convened the so-called Ccru Club to investigate connections between the fiction of H.P. Lovecraft, mythology, science and magic, and was at stage in the process of formalizing the constitution of Miskatonic Virtual University, MVU, a loose aggregation of non-standard theorists whose work could broadly be said to have the Lovecraftian connotations. The interest in Lovecraft's fiction was motivated by its exemplification of the practice of hyperstition. The concept had been elaborated and keenly debated since the inception of the Ccru Club. Loosely defined, the coinage refers to fictions that make themselves real. K drew Crew's attention to Burroughs' description of viruses and apukas here. And what is a virus? Perhaps simply a pictorial series like Egyptian glyphs that makes itself real. The papers K left for Crew included a copy of this page of the apuk text, with these 2 sentences, italicized in the original text, heavily underlined. For K, the echo of Weisbarov's language was unequivocal evidence of the Russians' influence upon Burroughs' work after 1958. Whether or not this is the case, such passages indicate that Burroughs, like Weisbarov, was interested in the hyperstitional relations between writing, signs and reality. In the hyperstitional model K outlined, fiction is not opposed to the real. Rather, reality is understood to be composed of fictions, consistent semiotic terrains that condition perceptual, affective and behavioral responses. K considered Burroughs' work to be exemplary of hyperstitional practice. Burroughs construed writing, and art in general, not aesthetically, but functionally, that is to say, magically, with magic defined as the use of signs to produce changes in reality. K maintained that it was far from accidental that Burroughs' equation of reality in fiction had been most widely embraced only in its negative aspect, as a variety of postmodern ontological skepticism, rather than in its positive sense, as an investigation into the magical powers of incantation and manifestation, the efficacy of the virtual. For K, the assimilation of Burroughs into textualist postmodernism constituted a deliberate act of interpretivist sabotage, the aim of which was to defunctionalize Burroughs' writings by converting them into aesthetic exercises and style. Far from constituting a subversion of representative realism, the postmodern celebration of the text without a referent merely consummates the process that representative realism had initiated. Representative realism severs writing from any active function, surrendering it to the role of reflecting, not intervening in, the world. It is a short step to a dimension of pristine textuality, in which the existence of the world independent of discourse is denied altogether. According to K, the metaphysics of Burroughs' clearly hyperstitional fictions can be starkly contrasted with those at work in postmodernism. For postmodernists, the distinction between real and unreal is not substantive or is held not to matter, whereas for practitioners of hyperstition, differentiating between degrees of realization is crucial. The hyperstitional process of entities making themselves real is precisely a passage, a transformation, in which potentials, already active virtualities, realize themselves. Writing operates not as a passive representation but as an active agent of transformation and a gateway through which entities can emerge. By writing a universe, the writer makes such a universe possible. But these operations do not occur in neutral territory, Kay was quick to point out. Burroughs treats all conditions of existence as results of cosmic conflicts between competing intelligence agencies. In making themselves real, entities must also manufacture realities for themselves, realities whose potency often depends upon the stupefaction, subjugation and enslavement of populations, and whose existence is in conflict with other reality programs. Burroughs' fiction deliberately renounces the status of plausible representation in order to operate directly upon this plane of magical war, where realism merely reproduces a currently dominant reality program from inside, never identifying the existence of the program as such. Burroughs seeks to get outside the control codes in order to dismantle and rearrange them. Every act of writing is a sorceress operation, a partisan action in a war where multitudes of factual events are guided by the powers of illusion. Even representative realism participates, albeit unknowingly, in magical war, collaborating with the dominant control system by implicitly endorsing its claim to be the only possible reality. From the controller's point of view, Kay said, it is of course imperative that Burroughs is thought of as merely a writer of fiction. That's why they have gone to such lengths to sideline him into a ghetto of literary experimentation. The One God Universe. Burroughs names the dominant control program One God Universe, or OGU. He wages war against the fiction of OGU, which builds its monopolistic dominion upon the magical power of the word, upon programming and illusion. OGU establishes a fiction, which operates at the most fatal level of reality, where questions of biological destiny and immortality are decided. Religions are weapons. In order to operate effectively, OGU must first of all deny the existence of magical war itself. There is only one reality, its own. In writing about magical war, Burroughs is thus already initiating an active war against OGU, mainlining contestation into primal unity. OGU incorporates all competing fictions into its own story, the ultimate meta-narrative, reducing alternative reality systems to negatively marked components of its own mythos. Other reality programs become evil, associated with the powers of deception and delusion. OGU's power works through the fictions that repudiate their own fictional status, anti-fictions and non-fictions. And that, Kay said, is why fiction can be a weapon in the struggle against control. In OGU, fiction is safely contained by a metaphysical frame, prophylactically delimiting all contact between the fiction and what is outside it. The magical function of words and signs is both condemned as evil and declared to be delusory, facilitating a monopoly upon the magical power of language for OGU, which of course denies that its own mythos exerts any magical influence, presenting it as a simple representation of the truth. But OGU's confidence that fiction has safely been contained means that anti-OGU agents can use fiction as a covert line of communication and a secret weapon. He concealed and revealed the knowledge in fictional form. This, for Kay, was a formula for a high-precisional practice. Diagrams, maps, sets of abstract relations, tactical gambits, are as real in a fiction about a fiction as they are encountered raw, but subjecting such semiotic contraband to multiple embeddings allows a traffic in materials for decoding dominant reality that would otherwise be proscribed. Rather than acting as transcendental screens, blocking out contact between itself and the world, the fiction acts as a Chinese box, a container for sorceress interventions in the world. The frame is both used, for concealment, and broken. The fiction's potentia changes in reality, whereas hyperstitional agitation produces a positive unbelief a provisionalizing of any reality frame in the name of pragmatic engagement rather than epistemological hesitation. OGU feeds unbelief. In order to work, the story that runs reality has to be believed, which is also to say that the existence of a control program determining reality must not be suspected or believed. Credulity in the face of the OGU meta-narrative is inevitably coupled with a refusal to accept that entities like control have any substantive existence. That's why, to get out of OGU, a systematic shutting of all beliefs is a prerequisite. Only those who can leave behind everything they have ever believed in can hope to escape. Techniques of escape depend on attaining the unbelief of assassin magician Hassan Sabah. Nothing is true, everything is permitted. Once again, Kay cautioned that this must be carefully distinguished from postmodern relativism. Burroughs' Sabah's nothing is true cannot be equated with postmodernism's nothing is real. On the contrary, nothing is true because there is no single, authorized version of reality. Instead, there is a superfluity, in excess, of realities. The adversary's game plan is to persuade you that he does not exist. The episode. Kay's story began in the summer of 1958, when his employer Peter Weisbrauch met William Burroughs whilst conducting occult investigations in Paris. As a result of this meeting, Kay was himself introduced to Burroughs on December 23 of the same year, at Weisbrauch's private library in New York. It is clear from public documentary material that Burroughs was predominantly resident in Paris and London at this time. Ccru found no evidence of any trip to the USA, although his biography is not sufficiently comprehensive to rule out an excursion to NY with confidence. There is no doubt, however, that shortly after the winter of 1958 Burroughs starts writing cryptically of visions, paranormal phenomena, encountering his double, and working with cut-up techniques. As Burroughs hunted through the library's unparalleled collection of rare occult works, he made a discovery that involved him in the radical, apparently unintelligible disorder of time and identity. The trigger was his encounter with a text that he was yet to compose, an old picture book with gilt-edged lithographs, onion paper over each picture, the ghost lemurs of Madagascar in gold script. He could not then have known that Captain Mission had taken the very same volume as his guide 3 centuries previously, already describing it as old. Flipping through the pages, Burroughs entered a momentary catatonic trance state. He emerged disoriented, and scarcely able to stand. Despite his confusion, he was more than willing to describe, with a strange sardonic detachment, the anomalous episode. 29 years would pass before Kay understood what had occurred. Burroughs told Kay that, during the trance, it felt as though silent communication with a ghostly non-human companion had flashed him forward to his life as an old man, several decades in the future, oppressed by a crushing sensation of implacable destiny, as if fragments of a frozen time dimension were cascading into awareness. He remembered writing the ghost lemurs of Madagascar, although it wasn't writing exactly, and his writing implements were archaic, belonging to someone else entirely, in another place and time. Even after his recovery, the sense of oppression persisted, like a new dimension of gravity. The vision granted him horrific insight into the jailhouse mind of the one god. He was convinced the knowledge was dangerous and that powerful forces were conspiring against him, that the invisible brothers are invading present time. The episode sharpened his already vivid impression that the human animal is cruelly caged in time by an alien power. Recalling it later, he would write time as a human affliction, not a human invention but a prison. Although there is no direct historical evidence supporting Kay's description of events, the immediate period after the 1958 episode provides compelling symptomatic evidence of a transformation in Burroughs' strategies and preoccupations during this period. It was then that Burroughs' writing underwent a radical shift in direction, with the introduction of experimental techniques whose sole purpose was to escape the bonds of the already written, charting a flight from destiny. Geison's role in the discovery of these cut-ups and fold-ins is well known, but Kay's story accounts for the special urgency with which Burroughs began deploying these new methods in late 1958. The cut-ups and fold-ins were innovative time war tactics, the function of which was to subvert the foundations of the pre-recorded universe. Cut the word lines with scissors or switchblades as preferred. The word lines keep you in time. Burroughs' adoption of these techniques was, Kay told Ccru, one of the first effects, if one may be permitted to speak in so loose a way, of the time trauma. Naturally, Kay attributes Burroughs' intense antipathy towards pre-recording, a persistent theme in his fiction after The Naked Lunch, to his experiences in the Weisparov Library. The cosmic revelation in the library produced in Burroughs a horror so profound that he would dedicate the rest of his life to plotting and propagating escape routes from the boardrooms and torture banks of time. Much later, Burroughs would describe a crushing feeling of inevitability, of life being scripted in advance by malign entities, the custodians of the future convened. Keepers of the board books, Maktub, it is written, and they don't want it changed. It was in the immediate aftermath of the episode in the Weisparov Library that Burroughs exhibited the first signs of an apparently random attachment to lemurs, the decisive implications of which took several decades to surface. Burroughs was unsure who was running him, like a spy in somebody else's body where nobody knows who is spying on whom. Until the end of his life he struggled against the thing inside him. The ugly spirit remarking that, I live with the constant threat of possession, and a constant need to escape from possession, from control. Escaping control. In Burroughs' mythology, OGU emerges once MU, the magical universe, is violently overthrown by the forces of monopoly. The magical universe is populated by many gods, eternally in conflict. There is no possibility of unitary truth, since the nature of reality is constantly contested by heterogeneous entities whose interests are radically incommensurable. Where monotheistic fiction tells of a rebellious secession from the primordial one, Burroughs describes the one initiating a war against the many. These were troubled times. There was war in the heavens as the one god attempted to exterminate or neutralize the many gods and establish an absolute seat of power. The priests were aligning themselves on one side or the other. Revolution was spreading up from the south, moving from the east and from the western deserts. OGU is anti-magical, authoritarian, dogmatic, the deadly enemy of those who are committed to the magical universe, spontaneous, unpredictable, alive. The universe they are imposing is controlled, predictable, dead. Such a universe gives rise to the dreary paradoxes, so familiar to monotheistic theology, that necessarily attend omnipotence and omniscience. Consider the one-god universe, OGU. The spirit recoils in horror from such a deadly impasse. He is all-powerful and all-knowing. Because he can do everything, he can do nothing, since the act of doing demands opposition. He knows everything, so there is nothing for him to learn. He can't go anywhere, since he is already fucking everywhere, like Cowshit in Calcutta. The OGU is a pre-recorded universe in which he is the recorder. For K, the superiority of Burroughs' analysis of power, over trivial ideology critique, consists in its repeated emphasis on the relationship between control systems and temporality. Burroughs is emphatic, obsessive. I in time any being that is spontaneous and alive will wither and die like an old joke. A basic impasse of all control machines is this: control needs time in which to exercise control. OGU control codings for exceed ideological manipulation, amounting to cosmic reality programming, because, at the limit, the one god is time. The presumption of chronological time is written into the organism at the most basic level, scripted into its unconsciously performed habituated behaviors. Time is that which ends. Time is limited time experienced by a sentient creature. Sensing of time, that is, making adjustments to time in terms of what Korzybski calls neuromuscular intention behavior with respect to the environment as a whole. A plant turns towards the sun, nocturnal animal stirs a sunset, shit, piss, move, eat, fuck, die. Why does control need humans? Control needs time. Control needs human time. Control needs your shit, piss, peen, orgasm, death. Power operates most effectively not by persuading the conscious mind, but by delimiting in advance what it is possible to experience. By formatting the most basic biological processes of the organism in terms of temporality, control ensures that all human experiences of, and then, time. That is why time is a prison for humans. Man was born in time. He lives and dies in time. Wherever he goes he takes time with him and imposes time. Korzybski's definition of man as a time-binding animal has a double sense for Burroughs. On the one hand, human beings are binding time for themselves, they can make information available over any length of time to other men through writing. On the other hand, humans are binding themselves into time, building more of the prison which constrains their effects and perceptions. Korzybski's words took on a horrible new meaning for Burroughs in the library. Kay said, he saw what time binding really was, all the books, already written, time-bound forever. Since writing customarily operates as the principal means of time binding, Burroughs reasoned that innovating new writing techniques would unbind time, blowing a hole in the OGU present, and opening up space. Cut the word lines with scissors or switchblades as preferred. The word lines keep you in time, cut the in lines, make outlines to space. Space has to be understood not as empirical extension, still less as a transcendental given, but in the most abstract sense, as a zone of unbound potentialities lying beyond the purview of the OGUs already written. You can see that Burroughs' writing involves the highest possible stakes, Kay wrote. It does not represent cosmic war, it is already a weapon in that war. It is not surprising that the forces ranged against him, the many forces ranged against him, you can't overestimate their influence on this planet, sought to neutralize that weapon. It was a matter of the gravest urgency that his works be classified as fantasies, experimental data, anything but that they should be recognized as what they are, technologies for altering reality. The Rift. For almost 30 years Burroughs had sought to evade the inevitable. Yet numerous signs indicate that by the late 1980s the control complex was breaking down, redirecting Burroughs' flight from pre-recorded destiny into a gulf of unsettled fate that he came to call the Rift. Kay consistently maintained that any attempt to date Burroughs' encounter with the Rift involved a fundamental misconception. Nevertheless, his own account of this episode repeatedly stressed the importance of the year 1987, a date that marked a period of radical transition, the eye of a spiral templex. It was during this time that the obscure trauma at the Weisparov Library flooded back with full force, saturating Burroughs' dreams and writings with visions of lemurs, ghosts from the land of the dead. 1987 was the year in which Burroughs visited the Duke University Lemur Conservation Center, consolidating an alliance with the non-anthropoid primates, or prosimians, in the western lands, which Burroughs was writing during this year. He remarks that, at sight of the black lemur, with round red eyes and a little red tongue protruding, the writer experiences a delight that is almost painful. Most crucially, it was in 1987 that Omni magazine commissioned and published Burroughs' short story The Ghost Lemurs of Madagascar, a text that propelled his entire existence into the rift of Lemurian time wars. For some time previously Kay's suspicions had been aroused by Burroughs' increasingly obsessional attitude to his cats. His devotion to Calico, Fletch, Ruski, and Spooner exhibited a profound biological response that was the exact inversion of his instinctual revulsion for centipedes. His libidinal conversion to a catman also tracked and influenced an ever-deepening disillusionment with the function of human sexuality, orgasm addiction, and Venusian conspiracy. Cats may be my last living link to a dying species, Burroughs wrote in his essay The Cat Inside. For Kay it was evident that this intensifying attachment to domestic felines was part of a more basic current, typified by an intimate familiarization with the cat spirit or creature who partakes of many other species, including raccoons, ferrets, skunks, and numerous varieties of lemurs, such as ring-tailed cat lemurs, the sifaka lemur, mouse lemur, and ultimately the gentle deer lemur. As initiatory beings, mediumistic familiars, or occult doorkeepers, these animals returned Burroughs to lost Lemurian landscapes, and to his double, Captain Mission. Kay was highly dismissive of all critical accounts that treated Mission as a literary avatar, as if Burroughs was basically an experimental novelist. He maintained that the relation between Burroughs and Mission was not that of author to character, but rather that of anachronistic contemporaries, bound together in a knot of definite yet cognitively distressing facts. Of these facts none was more repugnant to common human rationality than their mutual involvement with the ghost lemurs of Madagascar. We offer refuge to all people everywhere who suffer under the tyranny of government's declared mission. This statement was sufficient to awaken the hostile interest of the powers that be, although, from the board's perspective, even Mission's piratical career was a relatively trivial transgression. Their primary concern was a more significant danger, Captain Mission's unwholesome concern with lemurs. Mission was spending more and more time in the jungle with his lemurs, the ghosts of a lost continent, slipping into time disturbances and spiral patterns. Lemurs became his sleeping and dream companions. He discovered through this dead and dying species that the key to escaping control is taking the initiative, or the pre-initiative, by interlinking with the old ones. The lemur people are older than Homo sap, much older. They date back 160 million years, to the time when Madagascar split off from the mainland of Africa. They might be called psychic amphibians, that is, visible only for short periods when they assume a solid form to breathe, but some of them can remain in the invisible state for years at a time. Their way of thinking and feeling is basically different from ours, not oriented toward time and sequence and causality. They find these concepts repugnant and difficult to understand. The board conceives missions traffic with lemurs, his experiments in time sorcery, and his anachronistic entanglement with burrows as a single intolerable threat. In a pre-recorded and therefore totally predictable universe, the blackest sin is to tamper with the pre-recording, which could result in altering the pre-recorded future. Captain Mission was guilty of this sin. Now more lemurs appear, as in a puzzle. Lemurs are denizens of the Western Lands, the Great Red Island of Madagascar, which Mission knew as Western Lemuria, the land of the lemur people, a Wild West. It was on the island of Madagascar that Captain Mission discovered the word for lemur meant ghost in the native language, just as the ancient Romans spoke of lemurs, wraiths, or shades of the dead. In their joint voyage across the ghost continent of Lemuria, interlinked by lemurs, Mission and burrows find immortality through involvement with the native populations of unlife. In describing this process, Kay placed particular emphasis on Burroughs' 1987 visit to the Duke University Lemur Center. It was this colony of lemurs that introduced Burroughs to the West Lemurian time pocket, just as Captain Mission was drifting out faster and faster, caught in a vast undertow of time. Out, and under, and out, a voice repeated in his head. If time travel ever happens, it always does. He finds himself at the gateway, inside the ancient stone structure with the lemur who is his phantom, his ghost, seated at a writing table with inkpot, quill, pens, parchment. He uses a native drug to explore the gateway. Who built it? When? The tale comes to him in a time-faulted vision, transmitted in hieroglyphics. He chooses a quill pen. It is difficult to describe where the text comes from, but there it is, an old illustrated book with gilt edges. The Ghost Lemurs of Madagascar, an old picture book with gilt-edged lithographs, onion paper over each picture, the Ghost Lemurs of Madagascar in gold script. The vision echoes or overlaps, time-twinning ways where Mission and Burroughs coincide. They copy an invocation or summoning, a joint simplex innovation that predates the split between creation and recording, reaching back before the appearance of man on Earth. Before the beginning of time when attached to Africa, Madagascar was the ultimate land mass, sticking out like a disorderly tumor cut by a rift of future contours, this long rift like a vast indentation, like the cleft that divides a human body. They feel themselves thrown forward 160 million years as they access a big picture, a seismic slippage from geological time into transcendental time anomaly. The island of Madagascar shears away from the African mainland, whilst, on the other side of time, Western Lemuria drifts back up into the present. The Lemurian continent sinks into the distant future, stranding the Red Island with its maroon lemur people. What is the meaning of 160 million years without time? And what does time mean to foraging lemurs? Time crystallizes, as concentric contractions seize the spiral mass. From deep in the ages of slow panic they see the people of the cleft, formulated by chaos and accelerated time, flash through 160 million years to the split. Which side are you on? Too late to change now. Separated by a curtain of fire, the Ghost Lemurs of Madagascar opens out onto the rift, the split between the wild, the timeless, the free, and the tame, the time-bound, the tethered as one side of the rift drifted into enchanted timeless innocence, and the other moved inexorably toward language, time, tool use, weapon use, war, exploitation, and slavery. Which side are you on? As time rigidifies, the board closes in on the lemur people, on a chance that has already passed, a ghost of chance, a chance that is already dead, the might-have-beens who had one chance in a billion and lost. Exterminate the brutes. Mission knows that a chance that occurs only once in 160 million years has been lost forever, and Burroughs awakens screaming from dreams of dead lemurs scattered through the settlement. According to Kate, everyone on the inside knew about the bad dreams, certain they were coming from a real place. In this, as so much else, Kay's reconstruction of the 1987 event depended centrally upon the Ghost Lemurs of Madagascar, an account he cited as if it were a strictly factual record, even a sacred text. He explained that this interpretative stance had been highly developed by the board, since respecting the reality of non-actualities is essential when waging war in deeply virtualized environments, and spaces that teem with influential abstractions and other ghostly things. Kay considered Bradley Martin, for instance, to be entirely real. He described him as an identifiable contemporary individual, working as an agent of the board whose task was to seal the ancient structure that provides access to the rift. The board had long known that the Weisbarov library contained an old copy of the Ghost Lemurs of Madagascar, which dated itself with the words now, in 1987. It had been catalogued there since 1789. The text was a self-confessed time abomination, requiring radical correction. It disregarded fundamental principles of sequence and causality, openly aligning itself with the lemur people. What the board needed was a dead end. Burroughs was an obvious choice, for a number of reasons. He was sensitive to transmissions, amenable to misogyny and mammal chauvinism, socially marginalized, incontrollable through junk. They were confident, Kay recalled, that the forthcoming 1987 story would be lost amongst the self-marginalizing fictions of a crumbling junkie. On the outside it worked as a cover-up, but the insiders had a still more essential task. They had inherited the responsibility for enforcing the law of time, and of OGU, defend the integrity of the timeline. This great work involved horrifying compromises. He cited the Hermetic maxim, strict obedience to the law excuses grave transgressions. They're speaking of white chronomancy, he explained, the sealing of runaway time disturbances within closed loops. What mission had released Burroughs had bound again. That is how it seemed to the board in 1987, with the circle apparently complete. Confident that the transcendental closure of time was being achieved, the board appropriated the text as a record of a precognitive intuition, a prophecy that could be mined for information. It confirmed their primary imperative and basic doctrine, foretelling the ultimate triumph of OGU and the total eradication of Lemurian insurgency. Mission had understood this well: no quarter, no compromise is possible. This is war to extermination. It seems never to have occurred to the board that Burroughs would change the ending, that their dead end would open the road to the western lands. Things that should have been long finished continued to stir. It was as if a post-mortem coincidence or unlife influence had vortically reanimated itself. A strange doubling occurred. Burroughs entitled it The Ghost of Chance, masking the return of the old ones in the seemingly innocuous words, "People of the world are at last returning to their source and spirit, back to the little lemur people." The board had no doubt, this was a return to the true horror. Yet, Kay insisted, for those with eyes to see, the ghost lemurs of Madagascar announced its tubular Lemurian destination from the beginning, and its final words are lost beneath the waves. Kay's own final words to the crew, written on a scrap of paper, upon which he had scrawled hurriedly in a spiderish hand that already indicated the tide of encroaching insanity, remained consistent with this unsatisfactory conclusion: across the time rift, termination confuses itself with eddies of a latent spiral current.